Welcome back. And for the next half an hour, as you probably saw on the screen, it's all things electrolysis. And we're going to have a conversation about electrolysis and the rise of a new industrial champion. And I'm very pleased to welcome our two speakers for this. So we have Nils Aldag, who is the CEO and founder of Sunfire, and as you heard before, the new vice chair of the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition, and also Mrs. Maive Rute, who is the Deputy Director General at DG Grow of the European Commission here in Brussels. So welcome to you both. Nils, congratulations on your new role. We expect great things from you. Perhaps we could start off though, Nils, by you could tell us a little bit about Sunfire and what it actually means to be an electrolysis player at the moment and what it takes to get us to the industrial scale that the European Commission wants to see in terms of being a world leader.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you very much, Maive Rute, to be with us today. Before we get into this conversation, Maive, which shall be about electrolysis and what is needed from the European Commission and specifically from DG Grow to help create an environment in which European electrolysis players can become champions and leaders of this industry. I would like to first of all thank the members of the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition for putting their trust in a company, in a younger company, Sunfire, to support your interests. As said by Laura, my name is Nils Aldag. I am Chief Executive Officer and also a co-founder of Sunfire. I'm delighted to serve as the vice chair of this initiative for the next 1.5 years, together with Ignacio Galan from Iberdrola. Now, since today, it's going to be about industry policy and about electrolysis technology, electrolysis players, and how to propel that industry. I would like to start to give a quick introduction on our journey, on the journey of Sunfire that we've walked through, and that will probably lead me already to the first question in a second to you, Maive. So Sunfire is was about 11 years ago a typical startup. Back then, 2009, two friends of mine and I were sitting in a living room in Berlin thinking about what could be done with renewable electricity in order to reach all areas of the market. And we came to the conclusion that an electrification of everything directly, where possible, is great, but that there will be areas that cannot be electrified directly, where we will need molecules, so gases and fuels, in order to become the first region of the world to be completely climate neutral. And such regions include refineries, steel plants, cement production, chemical production, fertilizers, and so on. So back then in 2009, we started with this idea of developing a technology that helps you to convert renewable electricity into those gases and fuels, which is electrolysis. Back then, at the beginning of this journey, we were at a point in time where electrolysis itself was not totally new. So one of the previous speakers mentioned that electrolysis is actually a technology that has been around for around about 80 years, 90 years or so. So it's not a fully new technology. But what we understood was that the equipment would have to be improved in terms of efficiency, in terms of flexibility, because back then renewable electricity prices were at levels substantially higher than the levels where we are today. So just to give you an order of magnitude, I think back then we were at solar electricity prices of 40 cents per kilowatt hour, or 400 euro per megawatt hour, which is substantially larger than where we stand today. And back then, and actually with a lot of support from the European Commission, for example, from the fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking, we started our journey to develop a new, more efficient, more flexible electrolysis technology. But we did that in an absolutely non-existing market. Natural gas was so cheap and still is cheap that it made more sense to produce hydrogen from fossil sources than to turn towards the renewable sources. And obviously we were in product development stage back then, but really 2015 the first big change in that journey took place. So in 2015, with the Paris Climate Accord, it became obvious that we need to take additional steps in order to turn this industry into a renewable industry. And since then, the trajectory has been up, up, up. Sunfire since then has become an industrial electrolysis supplier with two technologies. On the one hand side, a more efficient so-called high temperature electrolysis or solid oxide electrolysis, which has been heavily subsidized, funded in its development by the European Commission. And on the other hand, Sunfire has picked up know-how through an acquisition from an old industry which wasn't doing too well in order to develop or to take over a so-called alkaline electrolysis technology. And this alkaline electrolysis technology is the robust technology that has been around for the past 60, 70, 80 years. Now, today, fast forward to 2021, Sunfire will employ by the end of this year more than 300 people. We have a track record of installed high temperature and low temperature electrolyzers. If you take the track record of the company that we have acquired, this accumulates to an overall 250 megawatt of alkaline electrolysis and SOEC high temperature electrolysis that has been installed all over the world, with the largest installations actually based on alkaline that have a size of 100 megawatt. So technology, as we believe, is there, and there is a track record for it. And we are now in the process of scaling up production and trying to do that as quickly as possible, while at the same time we're hoping for demand to increase, for regulatory environment to develop. So this is the journey that we've been on, and we're extremely hopeful. And I think it's worth mentioning that the most recent impulse that makes us so hopeful has been given by the European Commission with the 40 gigawatt strategy, the 40 gigawatt target, the hydrogen strategy, sorry, and the 40 gigawatt target to be achieved in 2030. But, and that's what we're here to discuss now in the following minutes, we need now to take the next steps and do that as quickly as possible in order to kickstart this industry. So last but not least, before I come to you, Maive, what do we as Sunfire want to stand for in this organization? We want to be a strong voice, very importantly, for renewable hydrogen, and we want to represent the entire value chain. So not just the electrolyzer part, but all the components that are around this. We want to increase the visibility of the electrolysis industry and the awareness of the journey that we have ahead of us with the experience that we have from the past decade. And we want to support all the different electrolysis technologies, as each one of them is needed in the decarbonization journey that we have ahead of us. So now, turning to you, Maive, I said this in the introduction. I think the key responsibility for DG GROW is to help create an environment in which EU firms can thrive, and not only the big ones, but probably also the SMEs, the upcoming scale-ups, such as some of the players that are part in this industry. We've heard of Inapta and Nel previously, now also from Sunfire. So how is DG GROW, and probably a bit more broadly, the European Commission, helping to propel the nascent but globally recognized European electrolysis industry to the next level?
Hello from my side as well. Pleasure to be here this morning. And Nils, I think you said it very nicely, that actually your company, I think, is a great example of bringing together the already existing, well-proven technologies. Some of them, as you said, 80 years old already, have been around for a while. And now the novel, the high temperature ones, which I think have a great potential of becoming really the leading technology on the market once the prices start also coming more affordable. As we well know, the cost of electrolyzers is one of these issues that has to be tackled because it indeed remains quite high, and the markets, as they grow, hopefully will bring the technology costs down as well. On the broader things, perhaps I would first like to say that we in the Commission, and particularly in DG GROW, we are very pleased to see that after all these years of investing in research and pilot projects, 15, 20 years behind us, we are now finally moving towards more, I would say, large-scale, real deployment of hydrogen technologies. And your company is one of these examples showing how it is happening. But it's, of course, good to say that there are many, many more in Europe that go in this direction. And as we well know, we see in GROW this as a key component of really moving towards decarbonisation of industry, particularly in these sectors which are otherwise difficult to address. As we all know, steel and chemicals, aviation as well. So we certainly can see the demand for clean hydrogen rising as we go through the energy transition of the various sectors, not only the energy provision itself, but certainly also the decarbonisation of transport and industry. And we have seen really great interest now over the last maybe a couple of years in the Hydrogen Alliance itself, more than 1,500 members. This is really a very impressive number across the whole value chain, not only in one or another segment, which gives us hope that it is going to be really a basis of this new industry to be properly established. And then if you look at DG GROW role, I would say, yes, we have a role, but we have a role also as part of the European Commission, which is working on all the elements needed for creating these new markets and creating the new value chain. We know that, if we look at it kind of on a broad range of scale of things, we have 4 types of issues that need to be addressed. We need to create a regulatory framework that would be, let's say, stable enough, but also conducive to the hydrogen-based production and hydrogen-based kind of industries. We need to look into the market issues, so what kind of criteria there are for hydrogen to be utilized. We need to ensure that financing is provided. And then, of course, technology development itself, which you have already indicated has been quite a journey and certainly continues as well as we go forward. So on all these fronts, Commission is actually working, and maybe just to say that on the Fit for 55 package, as you know, already important points have been put forward. You mentioned the target, for example, but similarly, we are working on further elements to really create clarity and an overall framework for the hydrogen to pick up as a key important part of the new green economy.
Yeah, thank you, Maive. So we will, or I would love to dig a bit deeper into some of the points that you have just mentioned. I would like to start with the first one, which for me is something that we've heard in many of the different talks that we have had before, and where people are now looking at the Commission and trying to understand what specifically can you offer in order to help build investment pipelines for electrolysis projects, but also for manufacturing. I'll come back to that in a second. So I think what everyone agrees is that this is a massive market opportunity. The 40 gigawatt target has sparked something in Europe, and I think with that also around us in the world. But it's clear that we need to be even more ambitious than that if we want to become carbon neutral. So the 40 gigawatt, which is already a substantial target, is out there. I think the global target today is probably in the range of 140 gigawatt if you take the different regions of the world that have communicated targets. So on the one hand side, this massive opportunity. On the other hand, we see that we're lacking renewable electricity. So we have to be faster on the front of renewable electricity installations. It cannot be that an electrolyzer has to wait for 5 to 7 years of permitting process before a renewable installation comes into place that feeds renewable electrons to this electrolyzer. The second part is that we need to have the production at scale in order to be able to fulfill this 40 gigawatt target, but also the 140 gigawatt target. And I think most of us at the moment, most electrolysis players are trying to now initiate the first investment. Some of us have already started the journey. We've heard about Nel with their 500 megawatt factory. We've heard about Enapter that have just kicked off their production scale up. Sunfire is in the process of building up, or is planning to build up a 500 megawatt alkaline production site. So the manufacturing side is an important one next to the renewables. And the third leg, in my opinion, is how do we create an ecosystem that then creates really the demand so that those productions are being utilized, and not just at the scale of 10 to 20 megawatt projects, which is where we are today, but more at the scale of 100 to 500 megawatts, which is what the industry wants to have and what we've started to engage in tenders. So my question is, how can DG GROW and the Commission concretely help to build up this investment pipeline for manufacturing, for industrial manufacturing on the one side, but also for larger projects than what we have seen so far, very specifically?
Yeah, indeed. So maybe I will begin actually from the kind of a coordination and support to actually bringing the value chain together. And you know that on this we have been very active. We have called for, well, the alliance itself, of course, is already a great way of bringing different players together, helping the information flow to really be established, helping partners to find each other. That's actually a very important role. But beyond that, you also know that we have invited a set of, we have basically invited projects to be put forward. And that has been a very good response to that. More than 1,000 interesting projects in different segments of the hydrogen value chain, and also with different applications. So not only going to the production and electrolyzers, but very much also looking at what are the transport sector needs, what are the needs in particular industries. So really covering a broad range of technologies and applications. And we are now in the process of looking at these kind of applications or project ideas and helping them to make sense of it, helping the partners or interested parties to find each other. And I hope that this will generate interest towards really having projects that can be then at some point funded as well. A parallel track is happening actually initiated by member states. And there you have certainly heard about these important projects of common European interest, or as we call them, IPCEIs or IPCEIs. And there is also important work going on where there is a good group of member states who have in their recovery and resilience plans, actually I would say majority of member states have foreseen in their recovery and resilience plans dedicated funds for hydrogen economy. And these member states now come together to also look into ways of promoting these new industries. And for that, normally state aid kind of rules apply. And that's why these IPCEIs are important, because that is a way of member states to come together and request permission for giving basically state aid to these new industries. And since we have such a really impressive number of not only member states, but specific companies and various players interested in moving ahead, we foresee that it's going to be more than one IPCEI. We probably will see several IPCEIs appearing at the end of this process, which will then again address different applications of the hydrogen in the economy. And again, I repeat, not only let's say the industrial applications, which we are very much interested in talking about steel industry or aluminium and so on, and fertilizers, but similarly also, of course, in the other sectors. So there is a lot of let's say work going on to kind of mobilize a sector and to bring also the necessary funding to it. But related to it, I want to maybe point out some important pieces of legislation that has also been put forward quite recently, and maybe not everybody is so familiar yet. So I would particularly like to point at this taxonomy piece of work, which is really massive. But among other things, in the Delegated Act taxonomy, we now have a definition. How should the various banks or funding bodies look at hydrogen? So what kind of hydrogen can be considered to be sustainable? And there you get actually a definition which I think is really essential, because this is going to help the future projects to get private funding as well, not only state funds and not only your own resources. So this is a very important piece of work, comes I think in June, was adopted this year. So this will be a major really piece in the puzzle of getting the financing sorted out. And then an additional element that might be of interest is that, under the big climate package, this Fit for 55 package, we also have further elements that will play importantly in the hydrogen kind of market shaping. There will be new kind of rules put forward how to certify again what is clean hydrogen, what is decarbonized, what not. There will be further pieces of work exactly on this renewable electricity, which you very correctly point out, that there has to be sufficient amount, and then the so-called additionality criteria when renewable electricity can be used for hydrogen production. Also on these elements, Commission services are working mostly in DG Ener side, not necessarily in DG Grow, but of course we keep ourselves informed as well. So we come to this, let's say, play field, particularly helping with the industry to be organized, working very closely also with our research side, so Horizon Europe side of the Commission, where the funding can flow to the technology development, and then working with colleagues who are shaping the markets in DG Ener, in DG Taxud and FISMA, which are taking care of the energy taxation and the taxonomy, as I mentioned, which will be important elements on the overall cost of or price of carbon, and the way how energy taxation will be formed, which also will have important implications on the, let's say, the gray hydrogen versus the clean hydrogen, and the new rules, the new taxation rules will give preference to clean, of course.
Yeah, I'll come back to that taxonomy element and that let's say the colors of the hydrogen in a second. But I think one point which you've mentioned and which is important, and probably also you have a bit more light to shed on this point. If you look at the way, especially the European Commission has supported this industry, and really I want to say that this, in my opinion, is an absolute success story. I've been very close to the fuel cell and hydrogen joint undertaking the past 7 years. We as a company have substantially benefited from it. So I think the Commission has done an amazing job at creating great hydrogen players in this industry. This is one of the very positive examples of how R&D funding has helped an ecosystem to grow, has helped to put partners together and jointly work on topics. So I think this was a great first step. Now you have mentioned the support for dedicated specific projects, which for me sounds like the CapEx funding of projects, which, and again, this is something we've heard a couple of times today, is important. But if you look at the total cost of ownership of hydrogen generation, it's not all. We need more than just a focus on this CapEx part. And that's on the one hand side, obviously, the OpEx side of projects. So the part that covers the additional costs that you have in the initial phase compared to fossil solutions, and it also covers regulation, for example, around purchasing green electricity through the existing infrastructure. This famous delegated act in the Renewable Energy Directive 2, paragraph 27, where we're talking about how can an electrolyzer purchase renewable electricity from the grid without losing the renewable property of this electron that is coming to the electrolyzer. This is this openness and this delegated act that hasn't been solved yet, and the fact that we are missing support on the OpEx side, I think is the key reason why we have this gap at the moment between good technologies that are there, a massive interest from the industry to invest into this, from the private sector to invest into this, but still on the OpEx side, not clear enough rules, how to operate this equipment, regulation, incentivizing actually, or closing the delta, the green premium, if you want. So what are your thoughts on specifically supporting this part of the business cases?
Yeah, well, that we get now in the conversation about, really the principles of state support. Maybe I will not dive too much into it, but maybe I will say still the main points so that we know that, what the playing field is. The overall logic of how the competition framework has been set up in the European Union comes from the logic that we support new, let's say, innovation. We support those, let's say, startups and really the early stage companies. But once companies are mature to come to the market and technologies are mature, that's time for competition to really sort out, who stays, who goes, who can win customers, and so on. So normally we see the competition as really the driving force of innovation and competitiveness, as the name of it says. Now, the hydrogen has been a bit of a different story, I would say, from the angle that it has taken quite a long time to kind of mature as technology through this kind of, as I said, support as well, which we have given through our research funding and innovation funding, and the research and innovation funding will continue. So that is something you can certainly count on, both from the Horizon Europe as well as from the new climate-related innovation fund, which very likely is going to be substantially increased. So the innovation and technology development, all of this is naturally something where state aid and the support can flow. But then when we get really to the market, that is where things become, I would say, more really, that's where the competition law starts to apply. And that is why for the technologies which are already close to market, that is where, or already even getting to the market, that is where these IPCEIs come to play, because the competition needs to be still kept as an overall principle, and within it, then we look into where the market doesn't yet work, basically, where it is justified that member states give further aid to companies. So I would say if we look only at the state direct support, this is relatively limited, and it has to be limited because it is not the role of a state to really go and subsidize private companies. However, there is more, and that is why I come back to this regulatory framework that Commission is setting, and as we go, basically, I mean, some of the pieces of work are already out there from June and July, and some further work is being prepared for, I think, adoption in December, and or some of the elements maybe earlier. So these, the kind of the framework that we're preparing, this is a very critical. The certification, what counts clean and what not. The various kind of also regulations for transmission of hydrogen or the pipelines. And so I already said about the financing of various projects. Furthermore, the state aid regulation itself is also being looked at. And you mentioned the issues of not only covering CapEx, but also possibly looking at operational costs. So there are also concepts about looking into this carbon kind of contracts for future, which might also be a way of addressing the price difference in the beginning. But finally, my point is that the solution is the technology becoming really much more, broadly used, the cost of technology going down, and in our own projections, we actually expect that also the clean renewables-based hydrogen is going to be comparable to the current price level of the gray hydrogen. So this is something that should come as we go forward and the clean becomes more prevalent in the market.
I think, Maive, that's a good final comment. The clean to become more prevalent than the fossil in the market. We hear that we can count on your support, on the support of DG Grow. That's great to hear. It was a pleasure to hear a couple of your thoughts on this and to speak with you. And I think with that, we are now giving back to Laura.
And thanks from my side as well. And talk to you then hopefully soon again.
Thank you, Maive.
Thank you, Nils. Thank you, Maive. A really interesting conversation there. I learned a lot as somebody who doesn't know a huge amount about electrolysis. So thank you very much. Very clear to follow too. And that brings us actually to the end of the first Renewable Hydrogen Summit. Thank you all for watching and staying with us. We know that you have very busy schedules, but we really appreciate you taking the time, posting your great questions. I hope you've enjoyed the various sessions today. If you want to rewatch any parts afterwards, or you want to share the conference with colleagues who couldn't make it today, you will be able to watch the full conference online at the Renewable Hydrogen Coalition's YouTube channel. And it will also be available in the event platform for a while afterwards too. So thank you very much all for attending today, and also to all our speakers again. I do wish you a good afternoon.